Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
My name is Ben.
and we are here to review the game week 12 action. Better for some than others, I'm sure, which we'll get into. But yeah, we're going to sort of go through sort of how we did, some of the key sort of team news, review a few of the games, and answer your questions. Might do a brief sort of check in on the latest yellow card situation as well. Um, but first things first, Dan, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Since the last episode, um, two defeats for Luton. Probably, we probably should have got something out of Sunderland, and then we managed to throw away a 2-0 lead against Coventry to spectacularly lose 3-2. Um, yeah, apart from that, I'm doing good.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I said to you before we were recording, I'm having such a good start to the week that I watched the highlights of this weekend's action on Monday, and by Tuesday morning had forgotten that I had done so. So yeah, anything sort of wrong on this podcast, I'm just laying that context out there now in terms of there's where I'm at sort of psychologically at this point. Um, so yeah, so I guess it was sort of just dive straight into it really in terms of the weekend. Wasn't the best weekend for me. We were talking beforehand, the not owning Borja Sainz continues to kill me. Although I did buy Balumi from Hull, who got me 10 points. The problem was basically everyone else. Actually, no, West Brom clean sheet came in nicely with Palmer and Hegem for six apiece. A Doughty for two. Uh, Pires vice captain for one. That was lovely. Particularly because at one point I was looking at Beck coming off the bench with seven and the vice captaincy moving to Nonto, who got five. And then Pires came on. It was just like, perfect. Um, uh, Balumi with 10, Brownhill 3, I captained Mundle, which was just 6, Major 1, Piro 2, and Sergeant 2. So um, not great. As I mentioned, had Beck on the bench for 7. Um, Not a great week. Not just because of Borja Science, it was just sort of, not much to speak of there, and a red arrow. Obviously, you have to play uh, two boosts in 3 game weeks now, so has the potential to sort of swing back quite significantly for me, which will be nice. Or if it doesn't, then I'll sort of be just sitting here, um, you know, drowning my sorrows, so to speak. So yeah, not a great week, but at least sort of as I say, the perfect opportunity to bounce back in terms of with boosts in play. So we'll see how that goes. How did you do this week, Dan?
So I got 52. Um, that was a small red arrow. I brought in Chris Rigg for Dembele, Captain Mundle for 6, Vice Captain Lonto for 7, had Grimshaw for 2, Doughty for 2, Burrows for 9, Pires 1, Signs 16, Rigg 4, Major 1, Piero 2, and Sergeant 2. The one game week where I didn't play Nardi, he got a 9 pointer. So yeah, he was on my bench. So yeah, I look at the team and I don't think there's too much wrong with it. Maybe Perez with his mentions, but just not getting captaincy right. Um, yeah, it's not going too great, but at least I had signs.
Yeah. Yeah, the Pires thing is weird, sort of mainstay of the team and then benched in two of the last three. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but certainly I know it's in the questions later, so I won't delve too deep into that and save that for later. So yeah, so that's how we did this week. Next up is obviously the team news, so I'll pass back over to you.
Yeah, so the relevant fantasy team news for Pompey, Archer started in goal. Bristol City Twine missed out, he's injured. For Leeds, Byron was in for Firpo. Obviously, he had a 1 game suspension for getting 5 yellow cards. James was in for Ramazani. Coventry played a 3-4-1-2. Wright and Sims were up front. Rodoni was benched. For Watford, the last couple of games, Bayo's been benched, and they've sort of played a front two of Barr and Chapatadze. For Burnley, as mentioned, Pires was benched. QPR, Seller was up front. Dembele, Powell, and Frey weren't in the squad. For Derby, Elders was on the bench. For Hull, Kamara started. Miller's out injured. For Sunderland, Moore was in goal. Roberts was back in for Brown after. Um, I think that was sort of a tactical switch against Luton. They wanted to get Brown's experience into the side. Um, Oxford, Harris and Scarlett have both been starting. Sheffield United, Campbell started. Hamer was suspended for 5 yellow cards. West Brom, Fellows and Grant were on the bench. For Borough, Ayling and Latte Lav were on the bench. Conway was up front. That's your team news.
Yeah, a few interesting things in there, which I'm sure, as I say, I know a couple have come up in the questions later, but um, I think the interesting one, which doesn't necessarily surprise me, um, was that it was Dan James who came into the Leeds team. Um, I don't think Solomon has been particularly impressive, and Dan James was obviously playing well before his injury. So,
He
um,
done well last year as well.
yeah, and I think that just that additional element he brings to the team, a little bit more sort of pace, a little bit more direct running, probably sort of complements what else they have there. But yeah, so we'll sort of get into we've got 3 games that we want to review, in part because we've got a few extra questions and the slightly shorter turnaround because we're recording on Tuesday night, in terms to the next game weeks, making sure that you can listen. But also we've focused on quite a few teams recently, so it's just sort of hitting on some of the main talking points from these. So I'll kick us off first. I'm not going to make people listen to me talk about Millwall again. Um, I'm going to start off on the what I thought was going to be a very different sort of talking point with this. Just Plymouth 3, Preston 3. Um, when sort of Preston went 3-0 up, I thought I might be talking about this, but for very different reasons. Um, Greenwood obviously opens the scoring, and then you've got um, both, I think, Potts and Frokje Jensen um, sort of scoring on top of that. I think it was Frokje Jensen in first half added time, and then um, Potts in the second half. Although one of my favourite occurrences is technically Frokje Jensen and Brad Potts both scored in the 48th minute, um, just in different halves. Uh, and then but after that, it was all change. Isaka scored on the rebound from a strike. I think it was a Randall free kick, I want to say. Isaka scored the rebound. Andre Gray with a good header to make it 3-2. And then in added time, Morgan Whittaker makes it 3-3. Uh, the crowd goes wild. Whittaker didn't really go wild, but the crowd went wild. Um, just a bit mental, really. I mean, credit to, I think Wayne Rooney summed it up well in terms of he was very pleased with the sort of comeback and some of the play they'd had, but it's not good enough to be in a position where you're 3-0 down, you know, after what, 48 minutes, and having to do that. Like, that you can take positives from it, that you did it and you got the point from that position, but that is an issue. Um, I think in general, like, you know, there's not that much to take from this game from a fantasy point of view, although there are little elements like Sam Greenwood. I think is it back to back games he's returned in now. Um,
Yeah, I
Frokia
think so.
Jensen doing well, Potts back into the team and getting a return. And on the Plymouth side, I'm not suggesting people go and pick Andre Gray, but um, he's probably got a few goals in him, not many, but probably a few. And Whitaker on the score sheet again. Um, I think, it's probably one of those things that shows. I think Plymouth seem to have done quite well in terms of nabbing goals in a number of these games. Um, but, they're going to concede goals as well. Um, they're off the back of a couple of clean sheets against them, I guess, is sort of like, okay, you get back on the board, both in terms of you get a point on the board, but also just getting back on the score sheet. Um, I think those who started Grimshaw will probably be a bit disappointed. Um, but you still got a few saves out of it. Um, but yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of any sort of fantasy assets at this point from these two teams, Dan.
It's hard to go anywhere near Plymouth. I think they away they're really struggling, and at home they can score goals at home, and they've obviously won games at home, but they've already conceded 22.8 worth of XG. Um, that's really bad. That's near enough two a game. They're just giving loads of chances up. I do worry though. I do think that I think we've mentioned a few times that I still think there's a high chance that they go down. Um, I think Broom's doing okay, but it's a bit worrying. Like I mean, especially the away form. Preston, on the other hand, their data is actually pretty good for a while now. I think um, their XG's been better than their last five or six opponents. So they're obviously attacking better than they were at the start of the season. Um, they were pretty much non-existent for the first few games, and then defensively they're doing okay. Um, I'm not sure where you would go though. That is the thing. Maybe a defender, but they don't they don't really scream out, really, do they? Like,
No, I mean maybe Potts is coming back at just the right time, because
yeah,
obviously this was his first game back, and you sort of think maybe someone like that, because you know I know it, but he sort of came off the bench where it's just sort of like, but it was for an injured Brady, so if Brady is injured, then that could be positive for him. But I mean, it's the right time to be looking at a Preston player. Like you look at the fixture on Bristol City at home. I know Bristol City have struggled away from home this season. Sunderland at home, which is not ideal, but then Portsmouth away, Derby at home, and Stoke away, West Brom at home. Like it's not the worst sort of next six. And so I think like, if you were looking at one of them, whether it's, maybe someone like a Potts, I mean, you could maybe say um like Sam Greenwood, um, or sort of Frokia Jensen, but like I think there's
I've
so many
gone
good
for
mids at the
Jensen.
moment that
Yeah,
I don't think you can justify going for one of them.
I've gone for Jensen a number of times over the last probably 16 months or so, and he's flattered to deceive. He always drops out of the lineup and things like that. Um, what about Emil Reese? He's taking over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things, like I say, with that fixture run where it's not bad. I mean, people are obviously looking around forward options at the moment. I think, there are worse punts to take. I mean, he's got an assist in this game. Um, he looks to be sort of fit. Um, he's up to, I think, what is it, fourth or fifth top scoring forward in the game now? which, I don't think he's on that many points, which is part of the issue. But I do think that he is someone, where you start breaking it up into little chunks of even sort of 3, 4, 5 games, that there's potentially someone like that you could go for, just to sort of tide you along. Um, yeah, so he's sort of just ahead of Matteo Joseph and Hadji Wright, only behind Harris, Sargent, and Madger. So yeah, there are worse places you could look than Emil Reese at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I'm
On the
not
other
sure
side, I
about it.
think it's Grimshaw. Like, if people have Grimshaw, particularly for a Jeepers Keepers point of view, um, good option. It really is sort of like the only other one you'd consider or whatever is Morgan Whittaker, but it runs into the same midfield issue of there are quite a few good ones at the moment, and I think going for someone like Morgan Whittaker just probably isn't on the cards at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
he'll tick over, but like you said, when you got Mundell with what 2 million cheaper, something like that, it's hard to make a case really.
that being said, I will say if you get out the other side of the Leeds game and are still looking around and potentially have sort of the money to spare because he is more expensive this season, little run of Portsmouth home, Derby away, Watford home. Um, Not bad, particularly given we've talked about Watford's away form before.
Yeah,
As a short-term punt, that's not necessarily the worst. But it's not one I would necessarily be rushing to, but it's just sort of, one to bear in mind, I guess. Um, so yeah, so that's basically it on them. Point that I'm not sure is amazing for either, but it's another point on the board, particularly for Plymouth, where they can take the positive out of that. But a couple of interesting notes out of it, I guess. Um, what's the game you want to talk about, Dan? Well, I'm not sure you want to talk about it, but
no, not really. I'm picking Coventry Luton. I'm going to probably focus more on Coventry aspect as we covered Luton quite a bit
yeah.
last week. So Coventry won 3-2. They made a couple of tactical tweaks. I don't know whether it was just for Luton, but they dropped Redoni and they played. Um, I'm trying to think who they played. They played the left wing, Kitchen at left wing back. I don't know. Our previous two games were against Watford and Sunderland, and we'd caused them a lot of problems for our height and physicality. So I think they just wanted to get as many tool players into the team as possible. Um, and it was a pretty even first half. Luton were 2-0 up. Um, Morris penalty won by Chong, and then nice work goal where Kraus slid through Adebayo and he finally looked like a striker with that finish. But yeah, we shouldn't have been winning 2-0. It was a lot more even game. Coventry had missed a couple of chances, last ditch defending in the first half. Um, they made a sub at half time and they put Redoni to left wing back. He's naturally left footed.
Mm.
Um, and we were struggling with their width. We Luton hadn't made any changes, and we'd played. I'm not moaning because I know it happens throughout the season. You have to do this. We played on Wednesday and they played on Tuesday. Going into the game, I thought Luton might have made 2 or 3 changes, but we didn't. And I think we just ran out of energy towards the game. We struggled to get out. Um, their first goal um, was from a corner. Sims beat Adebayo at the near post, and whoever wins that, it's hard for a goalie to save that. Um, Torp then scored a great strike from outside the box, hits the post and goes in. And then we're hanging on at this point. We go down to 10 men. Holmes got sent off for 2 yellows. Um, and then Wright scores pretty scruffy goal. I'm not sure if it was offside. could have been considering the offside that Luton got in midweek with Morris. Definitely up for debate, but Coventry definitely deserved a point and probably deserved to win it over the balance of the game. One thing to note is Doughty's going to be out. He's up to 5 yellow cards, so we've now lost Doughty and Holmes. So I'm not sure what our defence can be. Maybe maybe Mengi's back, but like we could end up having like a Jacob Brown at wing back or something like that. So that's not ideal. Um, I mentioned last week that I thought Morris would be a good option. He's fit now. He got an assist against Sunderland. He's obviously on penalties, scored the penalty. Um, and when there's no standouts, I know our fixtures aren't great, but he's talisman. And we saw him. He got 20 goals last year. He'll probably get 15, 20 at least this year, I'd have thought. Um, Coventry, they've just got to play with Wright and Sims up front. Like, it's not hard. Stop mucking around with the formation and just play your best players. Um, yeah, I can see though why they have been conceding. They're very open, and we were able a number of times to counter. There was 2 or 3 times when Chong's basically ran through their centre midfield. Um, so I can see why they have been conceding, but they've got so many good players that they're going to climb this table, probably similar to Luton once we get a few defenders back. So, are you looking at anyone from Coventry? Yes.
Well, I'm feeling particularly sort of spiteful towards Hadji Wright at this point. I'd held him for all that time, sold him, and he's remembered how to score. He's got goal in back-to-back games, so that's nice of him. I think he's another one that has to be on the radar just because we've talked about the forward position. Um, it's not necessarily sort of the strongest group at any given moment, and so I think anytime you have, certainly based on this season so far, anytime you have a forward showing some sort of form, that's something that has to be on the radar. Sims as well, I think, particularly if he has Hadji Wright playing closer to him, I think that's better for him. There's times this season where I think he's looked a little bit isolated, and so just having someone up there that sort of to play with him and everything, I think would will help. I guess the other one really is, we mention him every time, but it's just Ban Evite, just in terms of that defensive cover at any point, and he does get forward. Um, so I think from their side, it would probably be those three.
Tricky fixtures though. They've
Yeah.
got Borough away, Derby at home, Sunderland away, Sheffield United at home, and then Burnley away. So that's a tricky run. I'm not sure you want to invest in them at the moment. Um, Anything on Luton? We sort of went over Luton last week.
I don't think so. I think I told a couple of people who were looking forwards before the weekend about Morris, part just because I think he'd scored in midweek. The sort of change of system to the 3-5-2, I thought, helped him in particular, in
Yeah,
terms of just getting him more up the pitch a bit more, up with Adebayo, back to what they know. I think makes a difference. So I do think he is an option. I'd certainly go with him over Adebayo, even though Adebayo's got a couple of goals. I think Morris is looking good at the moment, and the fact he's on penalties, just that little bit of extra sort of chance of return. Apart from that, not a great deal. Although I will point out, I know a lot of people are looking around at Jeepers Keepers. I think Kaminsky is like second or third in the league for saves per game. So
yeah. I'm not
um,
well. We've conceded 2 or more goals in 7 games.
so in
So
terms of
we're
Jeepers
busy, and
Keepers,
we've
if
got
you're
no
looking for
defence.
saves, Kaminsky might actually not be the worst shout in the world.
That's true. Yeah, like I said, I don't know what we're going to do defensively. We've got McGuinness is our only fit centre back. We might get Mengi back, but Yes, it could be an interesting lineup, like a Jacob Brown at wing back would not surprise. Victor Moses and Jacob Brown at wing back.
Could be fun. Um, but yeah, so I think at the moment that's sort of where it lies. I think with Luton. Um, yeah, so we'll move on to the final game that we want to cover. Um, and in the theme, similar to the first game I picked, there's a theme. Picked games with that finished 3-3. Uh, so I really have sort of traded off in terms of uh, talking about Millwall last week. Uh, so Norwich 3, Borough 3. Um, this was a game I wasn't able to watch much of on Sunday. And I did think it could be decent. You've got Borja Sainz, who's in some vein of form, and I've seen it. Him cutting in from 25 yards out, sort of managing to ping it in. You sort of view it as unsustainable, and yet he keeps doing it. So, it put Norwich 1-0 up. Tommy Conway equalised, um, and scored a second as well. First one with assist from Borges, second assisted by Dijksteel, so that's an assist for each fullback. Um, he then also missed a penalty, which was obviously came back to bite them with Sainz getting a second with an assist from Callum Doyle. He's obviously doing very well, and then third goal goes down as a Dieng own goal. Um, which obviously they'll probably feel a little bit hard done by, and then a late red card for Kenny McLean as well. Um, all action. I think there's a number of players that come out of this sort of interest, either for those who already own and are happy with them, or looking to potentially move things around. Um, I think for her science, we've talked about him. He's, in an incredible run of form. I think basically started when I recommended him for people who were playing away days, and he hasn't stopped scoring since. He's the top scorer in the league now with 10 goals. He's going along well. Um, Josh Sargent didn't return in this game, but I think he's still a strong option. Callum Doyle, I know a few people have. I think he is. Um, Another good option. I think if you're looking particularly defensively at Norwich, I would still go with Doyle because he is chipping in with these attacking returns. Um,
What about Fisher? It looks like he's like first choice now at right back, and he's 4.5.
yeah, I mean, I think if you're purely concerned about budget, and it depends, people are at different places in terms of where, like how much of the budget you need to spend, then maybe you could look at him at this point. But I do think there is a significant gap in terms of the likely points returns and everything to Doyle. So particularly if you're going there, I would probably look and I do think that's the sort of one where I do think it's probably worth the extra million to just go with Doyle. Um, so if you're looking for them, I'd probably be looking at Doyle, but I think you know I'm already looking at, is there a way I can squeeze Saints in? Um, and I think him and Sargent are the main ones from Norwich. On the Borough side, I think there are a few people who still had Luke Ayling, who probably been a little bit sort of concerned when the lineup came out and he was on the bench. I haven't seen anything about it, but I assume it's rest. He's played a lot of minutes.
Yeah, it was
Um,
a 3 game week, wasn't it? So
yeah. So that's sort of the assumption for me. Borges continues to get the run at left back. He's got an assist in this game. I think he's sort of one to keep an eye on. Zaz, I think they said it was his first goal of the season, which wouldn't shock me, but
he's doing
um,
well for key passes, though, isn't
yeah.
he?
But if he's going to add a few more returns, I know he has sort of featured in the bonus, but if he's going to add a few more returns, yes, it was his first goal of the season. If he's going to add a few more returns into that, I think he'll be of interest very quickly. Um, Heard very good things again about Ben Doak in this game, and I
Very
think
good.
he's one to very much keep an eye on. Um, no bonus for him in this. I know there's been. I think there was one game where he basically just got bonus off like successful dribbles or something.
I'm not
Um,
surprised having watched him.
so I think he's interesting, and I think we do have to mention Conway. Started up front again. I think that's back-to-back games. Scored a couple. Obviously missed the penalty, but I think he's has a decent record at penalties. But couple of goals, and as we said, sort of people looking around for strikers at the moment. He's another one, at least in this game, who's put his hand up. Um, I know in the last game it was Latte Lath off the bench. Um, so there's that sort of element of he's always going to be there, and so how many times is Conway actually going to sort of play the full 90, for example? But I do think it's at a point where he started back-to-back games. He's obviously got a couple of goals where I think he has to be considered an option as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of those, or anyone you would add into the sort of conversation.
Yeah, I think going with the Conway just feels like rotation, doesn't it? Like, there's no doubt. For example, if like Latte Lap got injured, hopefully he doesn't, but like, that's like a no-brainer at
Yeah.
6.5. But they will rotate. They will take minutes off them. Um, Zaz, I was there at the start of the season. He was a bit frustrating to own, but he's just doing so well for key passes that if he does anything, he's going to just get full bonus like straight
Yeah.
away. Um, Doak's interesting. Uh, I would say he's definitely first choice over Jones, but Jones could come on. I think he came on. I'm pretty sure he came on in this game for Doak. So um, they've got decent fixtures as well. They've just gone through a tricky part, and they've got Coventry at home, QPR, Luton at home. I'm not sure that's too much of a problem for like an attacking player. Oxford away, Blackburn at home, Hull at home. So it's not terrible, and we all know about their XG. Where
Hmm.
they're near the top, they're just not converting the chances. So they're an attacking side. I think I probably would go as As. I know it's a bit more expensive, but he feels pretty nailed. Um, and like I said, if anything happens to one of the strikers, it's a nice, easy move, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if someone wanted to take a punt on Conway at this point, I understand, and I'm not going to talk people out of it, particularly just like I said, there's not a lot going on at the striker position at this point, and he's 6.5, where it's the whole you take a punt on it, it doesn't work. Like you've only cost yourself so much. Um, so I think that's potentially worth considering for people. But yeah, there is that risk of rotation in there that could sort of bite. Um, Anything else from the other games that you wanted to sort of get into?
Well, we've got to talk about Matt um, Michael Smith's goal, don't we, for Sheffield Wednesday? What a way
Spoiler
to win!
alert, it is the
Oh
goal of
no,
the week winner. Um, it had to be really.
yeah, it's a disappointing result for Portsmouth. When you do
Yeah.
okay in the first half, 1-0 up, and you still lose the game. I know if you're going to lose a game, it's not a terrible way to lose it, but I don't know that they're competitive. Portsmouth. I know they've had a couple of games where they've got hammered, but I don't know. They just. I, I'm just not sure. They're still trying to work things out. Lang's playing. They dropped um, Pack this game. Like they're trying everything, and it's still not working. But we know they've got decent fixtures though because they played everyone at the start. So
Yeah,
um, Hull away, then they've got probably the big one, Plymouth against Portsmouth next midweek, where you get that is a 6 pointer. Um, it's obviously at Plymouth, so that might be the one I'm watching if I'm not at the Luton game. Can't remember what day Luton play. But yeah, I think you had to talk about Michael Smith's goal.
yeah. I mean, I particularly enjoyed when they talked to him after the game, and he basically said he was absolutely shattered. So he just so it was his only so he had to hit it first time because it was his only chance. I did quite enjoy that sort of from him. But yeah, I mean, he's hit it so sweetly. Um, in a moment where they sort of need to put a few results together, and a moment like that, maybe that is the sort of thing that just spurs them on for a little run. It can just be something like that that suddenly gets a team going. But yeah, I mean, what was he like? 25 yards out, 30 yards out, and he just sort of hits it first time. And it's one of those great ones where it's like side foot, but he manages to get so much power on it at the same time that, it just flies in keeper, no chance. And yeah, one of those cliches, but a goal worthy winning any game. I've just checked for you, and Plymouth Portsmouth is on a different day to the Luton game. So
Oh, I'm going
there
to
you
be
go.
watching that one.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think that one certainly disappointing for Pompey. Sort of big win for Sheffield Wednesday. Um, I wanted to bring up the Burnley QPR game, both in terms of sort of it's one of the few games actually, but representative of some of the questions we've asked about Burnley in attack. They had a lot of chances actually in this game. I think this one felt slightly different to some of the games that we've had questions about, where it's actually been not necessarily creating as many chances as they should. I think there were quite a few chances in this game. They just didn't take them. But Pires left out again. I think that's a question for people. Um, you know, I think if people have Brownhill, they're probably keeping him. Collier show sort of a blank again. I think that's much more of a question mark for people at this point. But it's just sort of, obviously a positive point for QPR. But I think it's just sort of, still not quite sort of right or working for Burnley, despite how well their season has gone. I think there's still those elements of sort of concern at the moment.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about not so much talk about the game, but Bristol City have now drawn 7 of their first 12, and they've decided to draw 5 out of their last 6. So yeah, it's not terrible, but if they start turning those draws into wins, it could sneak into the playoffs. I think they obviously look pretty solid.
Yeah. Um, I also wanted to just mention from the Sheffield United Stoke game, Tyrese Campbell scoring against his former club, and it's not because it's Stoke, but not enough players celebrate a goal against their former club, and so I just love the fact that he didn't go overboard, but he did at least celebrate his goal, which I think when it's the first goal for your new club, like you're allowed to celebrate a bit, just don't sort of really rub it in their face or do, but just like that's sort of a different conversation. But I think actually celebrating the goal, like I think it's almost gone a bit too far of like not celebrating goals against your former clubs. Um,
I remember a few years ago we had player Luke Guttridge, and he scored a last minute winner against Northampton. He used to play for him, and he ran over to him, knee slid right in front of him.
Yeah, I mean the
Absolutely
one
love
I
it.
always go back to, I mean, always at this point, I think it was last season in the Premier League, Levi Colwill scored against Brighton and went to celebrate, almost realised and stopped. And it was just the most hilarious visual, particularly because he was there like on loan or whatever. It was just like, what are you doing? Um, but yeah, I mean, and also big for him, I think, just you make a move um, to a club of that stature, getting off the mark is actually sort of a significant thing. Kiefer Moore also managed to divert a Gilchrist strike into the goal to
Yeah,
get
he
himself
hit
on the
him,
score
didn't it?
sheet.
I love the tannoy. You can hear it in the highlights. They credit it to Alfred Gilchrist over the tannoy.
Um, but yeah, and obviously, big result for them, but just sort of, I thought, nice moment for him, but also just a nice opportunity to talk about celebrating goals.
And talk about Sunderland 2-0, just a routine win.
Yeah,
This, um, yeah, Patrick Roberts back in the side, goals from Bellingham and Isidore up front, and on to the next one. 5 points clear.
yeah. And the last one I'm going to bring up, I know we've mentioned basically every game at this point, but I'm going to bring up Swansea 0, Millwall 1. Uh, Swansea finding new and creative ways to not score a goal, and then getting punished at the end. I feel for them at this point because they're actually playing decently. They just can't seem to put the ball in the goal.
They need to
Um,
play against Luton at the minute.
and so it's one of those things to watch out for in terms of like they're clearly not playing poorly. And this was another game where they're clearly not playing poorly. They're just struggling to put the ball in the goal. Um, Oxford away, Watford at home, two decent opportunities you would think for them to get on the score sheet, but um, just want to watch with them in terms of almost how much it becomes a mental block as much as anything else. I think they haven't scored in something like 5 games now. Um, so yeah, yeah. So they've lost 3 games 1-0 and drawn 2-0. So at some point they'll score a goal again, and it will be
But they,
magical.
but when they do, they get 3 or 4.
Yeah. But I think that brings us on to the questions. We've got quite a few in, so we can get into people's questions at this point. Um, just looking at the tweet, these questions are in no particular order. Um, John Jacobs asked, "Does Science get to 250 points, or is he outperforming his data (in brackets nerds)?" Um, well, I assume he's outperforming his data.
Yeah,
Uh,
he keeps scoring worldies.
yeah. Um, does he get to 250 points? Well, he's at what
It's on 100.
104 after 13 game weeks.
He should do.
Yeah, he doesn't even need to keep up the current rate to do that. So, yeah, why not? Can't be negative about everything. Gaffer Hoops asks, "What are your thoughts on captaincy and vice captaincy for the coming weeks? I seem to have an incredible gift of picking players who blank. Cheers, gents." Borja Sainz.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm the best
Yeah.
person to ask, to be honest. I don't know. There's no standouts this year. I don't think we obviously went through the
No.
stage of Madra scoring, and I mean he's playing Luton, so probably put the captaincy on. But to be honest,
I
um,
think coming up, you've got opportunities, obviously, from Leeds.
yeah, against
Um,
Plymouth,
that's obviously the big one. You've got opportunities from someone like Burnley. Um, I think you've got Sunderland have a couple
Um,
of decent games in there. Like still the same ones. I think Norwich have a couple of actual options in there as well. So I think, you're still looking at the same players. It's just, yeah, nailing those. But I think, for example, this coming game week, Leeds are Plymouth at home. Like, surely you're going to have at least one armband on a Leeds player in that game and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, that sort of feels relatively obvious to me. Eric Nessonstad has asked, from a good start, it's now a sea of red arrows down to OR 230. Who can be trusted? Kolyosho is leaving now. Thanks for nothing. To who? Um, I mean, if you don't have science, he's
I think Azaz is an option.
yeah, definitely.
A
Just look, I
lead
mean,
mid.
Leeds coverage if you don't have that. Um, Otherwise, yeah, it's a little bit like maybe picking something you like it for 2 to 3 weeks and then reassess. You've got sort of Hull have a couple of very nice games. Um, yeah, Sunderland have a decent couple of games. Um, so maybe something along those lines. But I do like the Azaz shout. Uh, Mark Dorney has asked, are there any good forwards left? Money no object, best three for the next 6 to 8 game weeks. That's a long time. Um, I'm just looking, trying to find teams with a decent run that aren't Leeds.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, Josh Sargent, if you don't have him, I still think that's a decent sort of run. Um, the more I look at their run, the more I really like the sort of, particularly of the next four or so, to the Emil Reese punt.
yeah.
Um,
Isidore for
yeah,
Sunderland.
Nisidor is probably the other one in terms of if you're just looking around for punts that aren't sort of like, Piro or Joseph or, Sargent or that sort of thing. Like I think the other one obviously we've mentioned is Tommy Conway. Particularly if you're willing to just sort of take the rough with the smooth, if he might be rotated for the odd game, but he's obviously started the last two and off the back of a brace, you'd think he's probably sort of in in the sort of the first choice, but obviously that can change around a bit as well.
It's a 3 game week, so he probably starts 2 of the 3, I'm guessing.
Niall Fairbrother, best forward options for the next few game weeks. We've covered that. Uh, the artist formerly known as FPL Glasto. I've only used Park the Bus. Any idea on using boosts and fixtures to target, etc.? That sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I've got one left, and I'm doing Jeepers Keepers this week. I've got Grimshaw against Leeds and Nardi against Sunderland, so
Yeah,
I'm not going to get a better option than that, I don't think.
no, that's about as good as it gets. Um, think in my situation, I'm in the same situation. I've only played Park the Bus. I'm looking at playing Jeepers Keepers and away days. I've sort of had half an eye on away days in game week 14, in part because you get I think Norwich, Sunderland, Leeds, um, Norwich, Sunderland, Leeds, Middlesbrough, uh, and Sheffield
Sheffield.
United. So as a basis for away days, that's something that's quite handy. So I think you could look at it there. And Burnley are the other one that are away. They're away at West Brom, but in terms of potentially having cover there, particularly if Pires does come back into the team, West Brom with their sort of struggle for goals, that's not bad. Um, Depending on your setup, you do also have the likes of, West Brom, Sunderland, Sheffield United, Norwich, Burnley, all away this week. So depending on exactly how you balance that, it might actually be that you sort of play away days this week and then go into potentially a Jeepers Keepers. I think to me those are the two best outside of Park the Bus, and so I think it's just working out. Particularly, say you need slightly more, you need a bit more moving around to get to a Jeepers Keepers, but you might be in a better position to play away days right away. That might be sort of um, how you work it. But I think, you've got opportunities in the next 3 game weeks for those two, depending on exactly how you're set up at the moment. So I think those are the two I'd be looking to play at this point. Uh, Vetrianen has asked, has Elder lost his place, or is it only rotation after his injury? Um, I know there was debate even before the season about whether he would start over Forsyth. And so I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think it's perfectly plausible that whether it's rotation or him being sort of the second choice who will come in for the odd game, or whether he's the first choice, but there will be rotation. I think it certainly doesn't feel like he's nailed at this point.
No, it looks a bit like rotation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit frustrating because I've got him on my bench.
Yeah, although if you know he's going to sort of be involved, it's still not the worst thing in terms of that 4.0 cover that is going to still be involved. Um,
Yeah,
Ski House 78, time to jump off the Pires train.
I don't know. It's frustrating, isn't it? Like Parker's obviously got you're just too attacking for me. I can't have another attacking player on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't sort of tried to work out whether there's something in the opponents or something like that that's meant he's made the change in two of the last three. It's particularly annoying for someone who was doing well before, particularly from bonus point of view, to then be not necessarily nailed. Um, and with that little bit of unpredictability about selection. Uh, so I think there's an argument for selling. Um, Whether it's the right time, I'm not sure. Um, just looking at their fixtures, I mean, they've got some decent defensive fixtures coming up. It's just, the age-old problem with him as well, as we've seen in both of these games. I think he's come off the bench when not selected, which I think is the probably the biggest issue there. Um, Non-stop FPL's asked must-haves for away days in game week 14. Um, well, I think some probably a Leeds defender.
Yeah, I just think three leads.
Yeah, but I think you certainly need at least two leads. Um, I think at least one Norwich. Um, at least probably at least one Sunderland. I know it's not the easiest game for them, but just in terms of the way they've been going, I think you need that coverage. It's probably sort of all the ones you're thinking about. It's probably it's this. I guess it's those answers, isn't it? It's your Leeds, your Norwich, your Sheffield United, your Sunderland.
I'd try and get two at least from those teams you named, and then maybe throw in a couple of wild carders.
Yeah, like whether that's I mean, Burnley potentially defensively against West Brom away, I think is still nice. Um,
Maybe a
yeah,
whole player against Oxford.
yeah, Hull at Oxford. You've got Portsmouth at Plymouth. Um, Watford at Swansea. Like you could probably find something in there. I mean, Cardiff at Luton. Um,
Yeah, but that's the way.
so yeah, I think there's that basis, and then yeah, just find a couple of extra ones in there. Um, FPL how? I've one boost left to play. I'm not using Goalfest, so it leaves me with Jeepers Keepers or Performance Enhancement. Which one would you ideally go for? I think Performance Enhancement is fine. I think, we're certainly on the um, Jeepers Keepers train, aren't we?
Yes, it's just a lot more fun
Yeah.
watching a game and the shot trickle into the goalie's arm, and you hope it's a shot on target.
Yeah. Keeper makes a diving save, and you have to sit there and work out was it on target or has he got overexcited? That sort of thing. Um, and a fun one to finish on actually from FPL Mohammed. Hamer, keep or sell?
Do you have Hamer?
No, I sold him.
I've sold him as well. I don't know if he's sort of been in. I don't know if he's carrying a knock or
So that
something.
there was a knock, I think a couple of games ago, which was when I sold him. That he was a question mark, and that was when he was on the bench. He came off the bench, got booked, and got his fifth booking, so he missed last week. So I think in theory he's also had the actual positive of that is he's had that extra week to rest the I think it was a slight calf issue. Um so it's not
If
necessarily
he's
the
fit,
easiest run
he'll
of
play.
games, but I think to be honest, if you've held him particularly through that, I'd be holding him a little bit longer.
He'll play though. He's their best player when he's
Mm.
fit.
And they've got not a terrible run at this point, like Blackburn away, Bristol City away, Sheffield Wednesday at home, Coventry away, Oxford at home, like, and then they've got a couple of tougher games after that. That's not the worst run, but I think if there's something that particularly jumps out to you that you want, go for it. But I guess otherwise, it just sort of keep that.
Yeah.
And just to round off, because I was going to cover it earlier and didn't, but um, just to finish off after the questions, a few yellow card suspensions for game week 13. Um, so we've already mentioned Alfie Doughty is suspended. Perry and G is also suspended. Anel Ahmedhodzic is also suspended. And Jaden Bogle is also suspended. As we mentioned, Hamer and Junior Firpo are both back from suspension. But I mean, I've read that out. There will be people out there whose defence is now decimated for game week 30.
Well, you could definitely have Bogle and Doughty. That would be pretty popular, I think.
But it wouldn't shock me if someone out there had Bogle, Doughty, and one of Ng or Ahmedhodzic, like, on top of that. Like,
Maybe I've not seen too many of
I've
those,
seen a
but
couple of
yeah,
NGs around, like, I think just
definitely
because they've done a bit
Bogle and
better.
Doughty
But
popular. I think.
Bogle, Doughty, there'll be a number of people out there with both Bogle and Doughty, and that's two defenders down. Um,
Just four yellow cards. You've got Bellingham, Nonto, Hume. Like these are the main players.
yeah, I mean, as someone on the sort of looking at playing um, away
Well,
days
there's
in
loads of players on four.
away days in game week 14, I'm slightly sort of nervously looking at Nonto and um, so I think there was someone else, but I'd potentially looked at someone like Trey Hume, but I'm definitely not going to do that until I know that he's got through this game unscathed. Like, um, yeah, not necessarily the most fantasy relevant players in there, aside from sort of Bellingham, Nonto, and Rig is on four, Doyle is on four, so he's another one where potentially, particularly for sort of game week 14, I'll probably be waiting until confirming that he doesn't get booked this week. Um, we talked about someone like Egan Riley as well. If anyone's gone with him as the cheaper Burnley defender, that he's also on 4. Um, Joe Bryan is on 4. So quite a few there um, to be aware of. But yeah, in terms of the suspensions this week, it's Doughty, Bogle, NG, and Ahmed Hodzic. Um, yeah, so that's I think everything for this week. Um, we will be back after the weekend's games. We've obviously got ongoing League Cup action in midweek. Um, Sheffield Wednesday have lost to Brentford on penalties, and Stoke have gone out to Southampton.
James Bree with the
Yeah.
winner.
So yeah, so just keep an eye on that, particularly if you're looking at making any early transfers. Like you know, we talked about them. I think the only Championship team that's left playing this midweek is Preston, but given that we talked a little bit about them, it might be sort of worth waiting till after their game at the very least. Um, but yeah, all that's left for me to say is thank you for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.